Hello, Toast Party, bringing you today the 2020 Yu-Gi-Oh! Awards, celebrating the best and worst cards, archetypes, and bans of this year. Without further ado, let's get into the first category, that being the best resurgence in play. To the card that suddenly started seeing play this year, despite the fact that it hadn't really been seeing a lot of play in years prior. It was a bit of a toss-up, but I have to give the honorable mention to Martial Metal Marcher, being a card that saw no play and then all of a sudden started seeing all the play. But the actual winner of this year goes to FRAMEGEAR Gamma. Well, this card did see quite a bit of play prior to 2020. FRAMEGEAR Gamma probably should be considered the hand trap of 2020 because this card went from being a card that people were very iffy on to something that pretty much everyone became on board for. It was a question of, is it worth playing this card that can cause me to brick? But it all of a sudden became, yeah, this card is necessary evil to play this format. And that was pretty much the entire year was format worth of needing to have Gamma. But let's go on to the next category, that being the best old archetype support card. Going to the archetype that was given the best support this year, that has at least 3 years or older, that going to Shaddoll Wendy. While Shaddoll wasn't really a meta threat for very long, it has continued to see some fringe rogue play throughout the rest of this year after the Shaddoll structure deck was released back in February. And while it hasn't been the best deck ever, it still went from being a deck that was only barely ever splashed in Dinosaur to being played quite frequently throughout the year, and has also been spliced with many different archetypes this year, such as Invoked and Dogmatica. And the main reason that's even possible is due to this good starter card. Specifically in the Invoked builds and Pure builds, this card actually makes the deck do something. But let's go on to the next category, that being best card to be added to the ban list. To the card that really should have been banned earlier, but it's really glad to see this card not be legal in the format anymore. That being Sky Striker MOBILIZE Engage. While I was tempted to say Link Cross, Sky Striker MOBILIZE Engage was probably the far more impactful card to be banned this year. It is a bit strange to think that this card was actually banned in this year, but I'm so glad it was, because if this card wasn't banned, it probably would still be used in whatever the top deck was at that point. Sky Striker MOBILIZE Engage got so bad that it was being splashed into several different archetypes, so much so that at the time of its actual banning, the best deck was Orcust Sky Striker, which is a bit silly to think about. But a card that is a Rhoda plus a Upstart Goblin all on one card that wasn't a hard once per turn, and an archetype that could easily loop it, it makes a lot of sense that this card had to be banned, and I hope it stays so for a very, very long time. Up next, the worst card to be added to the list. Isn't necessarily a banned card, but at the same time, this is a card that it makes no sense for this card to have been put anywhere near the banned restriction list, but it's going to have to go to ABC Dragon Buster, being put to 1 in, I believe it was March. There's just one word that describes it, and it's right there on the screen. Why? This was done due to a preemptive limiting of archetypes that Konami thought would be suddenly busted in Master Rule 5. Buster has been recently released to 3, and it has done nothing. I was going to give the honorable mention here to Totally Awesome, but at least that deck has done something after getting its toads back. But ABC Dragon Buster was clearly the weaker of the two cards to get preemptively limited, and man, it was really disappointing for every player who wanted to play ABC once Master Rule 5 started, because they couldn't for the longest time. But glad to see it's back now, but it never should have been put on the limited list to begin with. Up to the next category, best card to be taken off the ban list. This is to the card that was taken off the ban list that has had the most impact, most success, and probably been one of the most fun cards to come off the ban list. That going to ZOODIAC DRIDENT. Welcome back, you've been gone for so long. Time to be back in a Tier 1 deck again. Well, ZOODIAC DRIDENT is part of a Tier 1 strategy right now. I don't think that DRIDENT is the reason why that deck is considered to be Tier 1. DRIDENT is an amazing card, don't get me wrong, but the problem here is not this one. But ZOODIAC DRIDENT did allow the ZOODIAC deck to suddenly become playable again, whether that be through Mega Collapse lines, being a stun deck with a nice card to stick the helmet on, or whether it's the current ZOODIAC ELDLITCH builds. DRIDENT has been a very nice card to have come back off the list, and definitely a boon to the archetype that it was supposed to be in. Well, without further ado, let's go on to the next category. The most high impact card printed this year. This goes to the single most influential card of the year and its impact on the 2020 format. And if you haven't already guessed it, CRYSTRON HALQIFIBRAX. When it comes to 2020, there is no other card I could think of that would be more influential than HALQIFIBRAX. While Link Cross was very influential, the only reason it was so was due to HALQIFIBRAX. Martial Metal Archer, also a thing that could only have been done through HALQIFIBRAX. So many of the best decks of the year were only possible due to this insane Link 2. And while the OCG had it for years, we only got it this year. And every time that this card was even close to being announced, or people were thinking, man, it's going to be out in this set, immediate buyouts would ensue. And for good reason. This card was insane, caused quite a few bans around it, at least 3. And it's kind of obvious to see why. This card just insane value that allows for some pretty insane combos. Next up, we have the strongest new archetype of the year. Well, there's quite a few new archetypes that were strong this year, but one of them seems to be far and above better than all the others. Because you had Dogmatica, that was good. You had Emancipator, that was also good. Virtual World, really strong. But when it comes to the strongest archetype of the year, yeah, it's got to be ELDLITCH. ELDLITCH has been pretty much or not far from the top deck of the format ever since it was released in Secret Slayers. And there's not a lot that you have to say about why. This is one of the most recursive control decks, if not the most recursive control decks that has ever existed in Yu-Gi-Oh! And you can pretty much splash whatever engine you want into this thing. Well, not whatever engine you want. There's just a slew of good engines you can throw into this thing. You had ZOODIAC ELDLITCH, which is currently amazing. Pure ELDLITCH, also just an amazing deck. You had Synchro ELDLITCH, which got Jet Synchron banned. So many other things that you could do with this. Oh, there's also Dogmatic ELDLITCH, Invoked ELDLITCH. The list goes on and on. But the whole reason why this archetype is the most powerful of the year is because you can pretty much do whatever sub-archetype you want, and you're still playing the best control deck of the year. This entire archetype was just insane. But on to the final award, the best deck of the year, going to the deck that has astounded and amazed throughout the entire year of 2020. Who could it be? Could it be ELDLITCH? Could it be Emancipator? Could it be Virtual World? In the end, Dragon Link. Gotta give it to Dragon Link because even though it kind of lost a few of its pieces at the end of the year, it has been the deck that has been holding on to the top 3 spot in the top 5 decks of the year pretty much consistently. I don't think there has been a point past February where this deck was not in the consideration for one of the 3 best decks of the year. And it kept climbing up to the top spot, and even though with this most recent set of bannings, I don't think it's going to be sitting at number 1 again anytime soon. I don't see it having any problem climbing right back up to being one of the best decks again coming in 2021. It's going to take a little while, but as this year has proved, Dragon Link always finds a way to be one of the best decks available, and with good reason. Well, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you have an excellent day.